Happy Monday, everybody.
Oh, hello, friends.
I think your button is still on. Are you not?
Oh.
Now try.
Hello.
Hey.
I have a voice.
There he is.
I
Hi.
breathe. I live. I feel. Now that you know it, can you end it?
Wait, what?
It's just riffing on the end of Equilibrium when the bad guy.
Oh yeah,
The bad guy
I
is
love
like,
that movie.
"Hey man, you got feelings, right? You can't kill me." And he's like, "Whatevs."
Bad Sean Bean, right?
No, Sean Bean died early on.
Yeah, I'm saying it was Christian Bale starred, and then it was Sean Bean. Right?
Yeah, he was in it. The bad guy was I forgot.
Rufus Sewell.
I don't know. I didn't recognize his name at the time, and I don't think I've seen him in anything since.
What was it? What was
Let me take a look. Man, Kurt Wimmer, the director, I was so impressed with Equilibrium, and even more impressed listening to the director's commentary on it. Like, he put so much good thought into everything. And then his follow-up work was it Ultraviolet?
Oh yeah.
That was just spectacularly awful. And then,
Angus McFadden,
Angus McFadden.
the poor man's Rufus Sewell. I remember Ultraviolet. I was like, wow, this is
Has he done anything since, or did Ultraviolet just kind of put an end to all that?
no, well, he wrote
No, Wimmer's
Total
done stuff.
Recall. He wrote the remake
Point
of
Break?
Total. Yeah.
I'm good to go whenever you are, Andrew.
I'm good.
Let's go.
You guys
He
ready to
wrote
do this?
Salt.
Yep.
Okay. Here we go. You good, Brian?
Yeah.
All right. Take it away, Andrew. In 3, 2.
Hello and welcome to the Weird Things podcast. I'm Andrew Main, joined by Brian Brushwood,
That's true fact.
Justin Robert Young,
Oh, hi, friends.
and Mr. Bryce Castillo.
Hi, everybody.
I just muted myself to adjust my microphone. Hey, listen, folks. I don't need to get into the technical details of how this podcast comes together. It's really complicated. It just involves atoms and molecules and stuff. There's a little interesting article in the news today
Yes.
about yes.
I think I know what you're talking about, and I'm very excited to get here. This is one of the longest running threads on Weird Things, if it's what I think you're going to talk about.
You're talking about the third one on the list here.
Okay. All right. Oh, wow. Even more news. So that's a tease, ladies and gentlemen.
So snakes, spiders, and space elevators.
Yep, one of the above. So researchers have been doing some very interesting work in growing clumps of brains in dishes, and now they're able to grow like parts of primate brains. Now, understand this isn't like a full-on brain, but it's not just like a bunch of little brain cells. So like, hey, what do we do? These things are kind of organized into structures. These neurons communicate with each other. You can actually, like in some cases, there's been reports of where they can give them signals and they give signal responses. At what point does this become creepy?
I mean, already way past that, man. wait, the moment you took that off ramp.
Well, look, is it creepy now? Yes. But these kinds of conversations, I think, are always about where our frame of reference is. You know, a wise man. I remember a wise man once telling me when I was but a youth that at some point you can imagine that people were horrified that there were whole banks filled with human blood. And now it is understood to be a noble, important, life-giving resource within where we have charity drives so people will donate it. And it isn't looked at as some bizarre genetic hoarding, but rather a good tenant of health and prosperity. Similarly, I think that's where we're going with this kind of research, specifically considering like the brain seems like the key to unlocking so much of not only our prosperity but also possible immortality.
Well, and plus also, I guess, as we've talked when we put on our futurist hats, oftentimes some crazy technologies at first make perfect sense to cure diseases. So in this case, like, yeah, we should know how to grow primate brains so that we can repair our damaged primate brains to people who have, injuries or so on. But then it's like, well, why stop at just making us whole? Why not just crank it up to 11? Let's get a little extra juice out of these noggins. And then at what point, like, you just keep on growing more and more brains till we look like Mars Attacks?
Well, how about let's just go back to the brain in the jar thing. At what point? So now what happens when they're like, yeah, we can make a whole brain. We're gonna put a whole brain in here. We're gonna put a whole brain inside of here, and test it and measure it. Human brain. We cool?
I mean, if we grow a human brain, but we don't know what it's thinking, or
we know we can give some stimulus, the Thanksgiving responses. We can trigger things like scent and smell and whatnot, and it's giving it's alive.
Man, no, that's an interesting moral conundrum, because if we have that ability to build a genetic, I mean, at that point, it wouldn't even be a simulacrum. It would be an actual brain, but a brain without a body and theoretically with consciousness, and yet no stimulation, thought without direction or input sounds horrifying to me. But I guess that happens to people who are, with locked in syndrome and so on.
Well, but also it seems clear that it is only through that barrier that we have a greater understanding and enhancement of everybody's life, right? Like, if we are creating this aimless thought for the purpose of understanding it, then yes, we have responsibility, and yes, it is. I mean, I guess to Andrew's point, yes, it is indeed creepy. It is indeed something that we will look at and say, this is very, very creepy. I can't believe that we're doing this. Much in the same way that we look at animal testing in a way that we're like, oh, well, that seems cruel to do to animals. It is justified by what we get out of it. And if we get out of it a greater understanding of our own brain, then our societal line for how creepy it is will decrease.
I love the idea that there's a whole lab of people, and just there's somebody, they keep on saying, like, oh my God, I can't believe we're doing this. Oh, it's so creepy. Oh, it's so freaky. We're making a brain. Oh, I can't believe it.
And then, like, a week
stop.
later,
Keep
like,
going.
oh, remember when we did that? Now we're making the bigger one. Oh, it's gross. It's gross.
Yeah.
Okay. You've made the argument, Justin, like, well, if it's for human advancement, I'm okay with, as you said, testing on humans who have no ability to give consent. It just happen to be brains. Understood. It's a summation of your argument, right?
All right, 700 Club. Fine, go ahead.
Okay. And we're always looking at the noble things, but what if it's some like, we're working on this boner drug, we just want to make sure that it doesn't cause hallucinations, So what if it's for, I think that, and this is an area that ethicists, bioethicists talk about, extensively. There are entire conferences that deal with this stuff. There's a whole literature out there about this, but it's a thing to think about, is say, okay, we're okay with this. We're okay with these clusters. At what point do we go, whoa? And there are limits that scientists sort of, I think, they agree upon. Like, let's not go full neocortex. Let's not give this thing sentience, whatever, but it's.
Now that's interesting. If they could just do the parts of the brain, like, just a limbic system or whatever, and then test on it, especially if you're, building things to repair it, that seems totally ethical. And we've already talked before about the idea, as creepy as it sounds, like, I'm on board with growing a clone of a body without a head, just, for backup organs, because there's no consciousness or in there. Man, that is who boy.
Yeah. These are questions. I don't have a strong opinion.
So
on this.
how much primate brains were they able to grow?
They called organoids. They're able to grow, some human brains to an extent. And if we look at, I have not seen. There are some interesting sort of like images that show the growth of these things. I'm not quite sure how much, but these things have been arranging themselves into 3D structures, and these things are these are brain cells and stuff, like neurons that we have, but this is nowhere near a brain right now, like a human brain. There's a whole structure, there's an organizational thing, there's a lot more that goes into it. And it's extremely useful for figuring out how things like, Alzheimer's and other sorts of diseases and things work. But you can see the structure. We're looking at an image right here of what they call an organoid.
Yeah,
the complexity there. Yeah.
I mean, I hate to put it in simple terms, but you're right. It's creepy. You're right. It's scary. Implications down the road or whatever. But all of that is so quickly trumped at this moment by our desperate need to know more about the diseases and have tools to be able to correct those diseases.
Yeah, and that's my larger point. Is we have a way of justifying things if they immediately benefit us. Like, if the idea, if you walked into your neighbor's house and he had a gigantic fish tank full of blood, you'd be like, I need to call the police. But if they do it at a hospital or some kind of a clean facility, and now all of a sudden your accident is survivable because they have your type on hand, then you're like, oh my God, thank God this thing is here. So there's always a line in which the benefit will outweigh the means to a certain point. And look, there's a reason why we have entire conferences to the bioethics of it and exactly how far we should push and if they're the right way to do it. Because obviously you can cross the line, and thankfully we should be talking about it.
Question was asked in our chat section here: could this techniques like this be used for helping functions for paraplegics and quadriplegics? That's those are some of the potential areas of research that this applies to. It's one that if you can influence neurons to grow and you can regrow these structures and not just one-offs, whatever. And like here, looking at 3D structures, et cetera, that's one of the potential areas for this. So there's a lot of them, that talking to it. We have one of our commenters here knows way more about this topic than we do. So it's always
Tally Zarel, who is one of our favorite Diamond Club commenters, actually does work on neurosurgery or neuroexperimentation, not neurosurgery, neuroexperimentation out in Canada. But she is constantly toying with mouse brains and learning what we have to be learned. Yeah,
she points out we can differentiate neurostem cells, but not having developed into neuroblastoma, which is what you don't want to happen where things go out of control. And that's the beautiful thing about petri dishes, things like this, to contain environments. But yeah, that's the problem, is that you can get things to grow, but how do you regulate this growth and how do you control it? So, yeah. Hey, I got a cool hack for you.
Oh, right on.
What if what's the craziest cool hack you've ever heard of? I've got the best one ever. I mean, I'll let you guys try.
Are you talking about like a
computing
hack,
exploit hack?
Not like a life hack where you put a dustbin on top of a 2-liter and it makes you pour things into the 2-liter easy or something like that. Like these
you add your own diet of Crystal Pepsi, make it whatever color you want.
Exactly. Yeah. Like those awesome life hacks. I feel like those have gone away. That might be a little bit dated. I don't know if they're still going on. The life hack revolution.
Peak life hack for me was actually the same one that was peak life hack for Merlin Mann. Was life hacker had was literally like used dishwater dish cleaning detergent in your dishwasher for cleaning her dishes. I remember reading this. I'm like, well, we've run to the end of this, and I saw Merlin Mann post a tweet like, I'm like, yeah, like that was just.
That's amazing.
He reached the end of the internet.
Coolest like computer code hack, like computer exploit hack.
Well, I mean, I know the one that's making the news is that whole spying on other people by joining a group chat conversation and FaceTiming, getting 15 seconds of other people's times. That's a pretty good bug, I would imagine.
Yeah, so that was a bug in group FaceTime where you were able to hear the microphone before somebody picked up, but that's not like a proper hack, like I think that would be more the terrain of a podcast that Brian turned me on to, the Darknet Diaries kind of hacks that have become kind of infamous or interesting.
Well, I've got one for you here.
Go ahead. Because there are a couple, and I do want to shout out Darknet Diaries because I do enjoy it, but the one that they recently talked about, which I thought was pretty interesting and had some fairly cool implications, is one where a guy realized, and this was didn't take a ton of great code, but basically figured out a way to use open printer ports to have tens of thousands of printers all print out your settings are insecure and subscribe to PewDiePie. Subscribe from T-Series. But it was a great interview. But all right, but that apparently not even making not even entering the arena when it comes to Andrew's 10,000-pound gorilla top number 1 hack of all time.
It strikes all the right things for me. It's technology, bioscience, aliens, everything.
Oh, wait, is it when Jeff Goldblum hacked the aliens at the end of Independence Day?
It's close.
Oh my God!
This was some researchers from University of Washington. This is the claim here. They presented an exploit where they were able to put code, and this is Tadayoshi Kono. They were able to put malicious code, to be able to like take over a computer, into a strand of DNA.
Oh,
that then was read by a sequencer, and it was able to exploit the sequencer because they found a bug in the way the sequencer would process the DNA and theoretically take control of a DNA sequencer.
Yeah, that's some. Now, I did see this headline go past, and I skimmed it. I guess this was a very specific case where it's like, they engineered it for this specific machine because they knew there was this code. But as a proof of concept, that's astonishing, man. Yeah,
I mean that's the equivalent of that would be, figuring out like. That was like, an image that could hack a visual recognition system. Look at this image, which I think it's been something that's been used. I think Neil Stephenson used that as like a plot point or something like that. But that's kind of a creepy, creepy idea.
Yeah,
that's insanely creepy. Like, I mean, as if we need to worry more about, the new front of worrying about technology, which we have done since the advent of the earliest, most crude forms of technology. The idea that there is something that can replicate within us that would be directed by somebody else is insane. That's crazy.
Or just the idea that that's a thought that's been addressed before. I talked to some researchers a while ago who are looking to see like, could they find in junk DNA, which it's a very not quite accurate term, but they were looking for signs of kinds of encoding, like did DNA have its own way of doing compression and stuff. But the other thing that's to talk about is like, could there be, did instead of looking for signals with SETI, did aliens just put some patterns inside of our DNA that isn't even there? Then one day, like they'll show up, like, yeah, no, we visited you like 500 million years ago.
Oh, essentially taking one of our early species or whatever and doing the equivalent of putting an ear tag on us, where it's just like just in case somebody else comes along, we already know them. They're fine. Eventually, they'll be growing their own brains in petri dishes.
What if they show up and they're like, hey, we got a cure for cancer. It's not cheap. We got a cure for cancer. I'm like, wait, how do you have a cure for cancer?
It's called the undo button on our previous work.
It's like, oh, jeez.
Wow, that would be hilarious if all of a sudden, like, that's our first contact to alien life is the fact that some intergalactic federation has officially unlocked advertising rights for Earth,
or essentially they've ransomwared our whole planet's population, and they're like, "Do you guys have a Galacticoin? We're gonna need 6 bazillioids of it."
Well, I'm gonna go a little future conspiracy theory. I know it's not something we believe now, but like, man, like looking at like these Bitcoin ransom heists, what we just talked about, the DNA thing. Imagine somebody engineering a version of the flu, but there's a cure, and it costs you 1,000 Bitcoins each to get it.
Man, and what if here's the really sinister thing is...
Oh, that's not sinister.
Well, no. The sinister thing would be it's not even fatal. It's just like a bummer. Yeah. It's like, hey man, look, it's
like mono.
You got an option. You could take a week off of work and get very little done, or you can get back to work immediately if you just give us 1,000. Wow.
I mean, I guess we have like the proto versions of that in Vegas with those hook you up to an IV bag clinics, right? Like they're selling you on both sides of it. They're like, hey, get drunk in the desert, and then when you wake up with a splitting headache, they're like, hey, we'll hook a bag of water up to your arm.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the idea of engineering something like,
Of course, yeah,
how people like
same, yeah.
Right now you have this thing where companies that have unsecure networks find out like, oh, all of your data has been encrypted, like hospital records and stuff. It's been encrypted. Yeah. Pay us Bitcoin and we'll unencrypt it for you. So.
No, that would be like what level? All right, so let's say that happens. Who goes after them? Like under what jurisdiction is the biohacker who's ransoming people $1,000 to just?
I mean, it would be FBI, but you would have with an assist from the CDC, things like this. You're looking for things when you get like anthrax scares or stuff like that.
Yeah, but this would be on a level. I mean, like that would be.
Well, it's bioterrorism, so it could be DHS. I mean, it's a lot of things. So
yeah. So I mean, that would be like that would fall under on a lot of people's plates, right? Like that would be crazy.
Yeah. Excuse me, guys. I gotta go write a book. You know what? I won't, because I'm going to stay here due to the support of everybody here, all of our fans on Patreon.
Absolutely. Patreon.com/weirdthings is where you can support this show. Head on over there right now and give us whatever you got, man. This is a fun little place in which we talk about all sorts of things. We bring you science news. We bring you musings of the odd. We bring you stories about snakes and spiders. We reward long-term listening like we will right after this Patreon plug because we love you so. And if you love us back, then head on over to patreon.com/weirdthings.
All right. Let's go to the story that was teased at the beginning. And I come here to praise Caesar, okay? There was an idea that was started several years ago, and I think we all had enthusiasm for part of the idea. I had a big issue with the mission because I thought it was very fatalistic and not really looking at where we are, and also just the Enterprise set about to accomplish this. We're talking about Mars One. Mars One was the group that several years ago came out and said, "Hey, we're gonna fund our own mission to Mars. It's going to be one way. We're gonna raise money through having people join Mars One and pay the entrance fees and do this, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna basically send 100 people to live on Mars, and we're gonna pay for the rest of this through reality television." Which, as a producer of this stuff, I thought comical, but they wanted to do this because their goal is let's go to Mars. But their plan was to send a group of people to Mars and leave them there, but then make them dependent upon extremely expensive resupply missions or just, watch them and die. I had problems with that approach. Yeah.
I think what was our initial thoughts on this were it on its very, 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 very base level. We like the idea of more people putting money into exploring space and Mars specifically. I think Andrew laid out some of the issues in terms of the specifics of it. But if I remember correctly, the first big question was almost as much about whether or not it was ethical to send one-way missions to Mars.
And that was a discussion we were having. Part of the reason we were so infatuated with Mars One is because before Mars One was announced, we were having that question, and we I think I talked about that Radiolab idea of sending somebody one way to Mars, and the schism, if I as best I remember, is. I was a fan of them trying, and I knew that Mars One was doomed and was never going to work to begin with. But I like people trying crazy, stupid things. And Andrew seemed like the distorted memories I have is Andrew's just like, like stop trying to punch the sun. You can't do it. You know,
No.
it was so ludicrous that you were not a fan of it from the beginning.
My problem was, one, it was a grift. It was hey, sign up, pay us this. We're going to try to go do this. Their plan was idiotic. They didn't bring in people to go in and say, is this a viable plan? So they went out and they fundraised with a dumb. That was my problem. They didn't bring in experts on this to say, is this feasible? And I'm like, I can only cheer people poking themselves in the eye so much. I'm all for citizen space stuff. If somebody wanted to do, hey, we're going to do Mars 3, and our plan is we want to subsidize, their plan was, oh, how are you going to get there? We're going to hire SpaceX. Okay. If somebody had said back then, we want to go to Mars, our goal is we're going to try to build a sustainable colony there. We know it's early stages, but we want to do this. We're not going to grift people for membership subscriptions and stuff and tell people they've been selected and given these false hopes and false dreams like this. There were so many things they could have done differently that'd be fine. I think we need a citizens organization that wants to go there and wants to colonize. I want that. I didn't want a citizens death cult that wanted to send people to die there. That was my problem, because that was effectively what was going to, had they ever managed to, their plan was, oh, we'll go there. And then to me, it was the go for Mars. I'm wearing my Martian T-shirt
for audio listeners. Yeah, Andrew's holding his Martian T-shirt.
So my problem was it sucks the air out of the room for other stuff, because SpaceX dealt with a problem for several years. And again, Mars One has a right to do whatever they want as long as they're within the law. No problem with that. But I would encounter so many people like, oh, is SpaceX, aren't they the ones that want to send people to Mars to never come back or whatever? And it's like, that was my problem. I'm like, I see this headache coming.
Well, let's also get the news peg out of the way. Mars One has declared bankruptcy, or had bankruptcy declared upon it. I couldn't quite make
the corporate the for-profit side of it. And that was part of the issue. There's a for-profit side of it. Yeah, apparently has declared bankruptcy. The nonprofit exists, but it's not funded.
Okay, so I think it breaks into two issues, one of which is something that we can debate, and the other, I think, is a little clearer. And let's start with the grift part, because that, to me, is where most serious conversation about Mars One specifically kind of ends. If the three of us were to say, we're going to make a phone better than the iPhone, and we're going to do it within 5 years, and everybody needs to pay us the $800 to make it, and we will deliver sometime within the next 5 to 8 years, that would probably be a grift. Because there's reasonably, we can probably make a phone, but it's not going to be a phone as good as the iPhone. We have very little infrastructure. We have very little planning. We're just three guys on a podcast. So that is taking an idea that is feasible, and it is exploiting it for money now, without any reasonable pathway to, we make a phone in 7 to 8 years.
Think legally that would make it a grift. Legally, this is the subject of the whole movie Tucker, A Man in His Dream, is the difference is whether or not we believed we could do it, and whether or not in good faith we tried. I mean, business all the time, like whether we can or can't. If we try, then it's not a grift.
Okay. Then maybe grift. I don't want to get bogged down on whether or not it's illegal, right? But I do think that it is, whether or not we believe that we can. If something is transparently foolhardy, I do think that you are owed, at the very least, we could be looked at by those around us and say, you are leading people off a cliff. And if I don't have an answer for why that cliff isn't coming, then I do think that should reflect poorly on our reputations.
Sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the grift part I bring up came from the claims that they were selling like memberships, or you could get in there and you'll get into the special astronaut group or whatever. Claims that was where people were being told, oh yeah, no, like if you pay more, then we're gonna you're gonna be in the next tier or whatever. Claims of that approach. I don't want to disparage, but that's where a big part of that came from. Like, yeah, I think that Pardon me, sorry for that. I think that they were sincere. I don't doubt that when they started this, they thought it was a realistic idea, but they went out of their way to avoid, talking to people who could say, well, here's a more realistic thing. Here are the issues. I ran into this when I worked for the James Randi Educational Foundation. We get people in there who have these, quack cures and stuff like that. And that's very different than Mars. I mean, that's maybe not compare the Mars One people to people who are like, going to kill you if something doesn't work. But with these quack remedies, most people believe they worked. And then you'd say, well, how about if you do this test or whatever? They're like, meh, what about this sort of approach? Meh. And that was the thing. It's like, I think they were sincere, but they also sort of avoided, a lot of the due diligence because, sending people to Mars is serious.
Yeah, sure. Well, so. and if I was going to give my most charitable defense in the abstract, because I agree, if they were running a scheme, and it does seem like they had a whole bunch of structures, and I wouldn't be surprised if it came out that internally a bunch of people are like, yeah, we're never going to make it to Mars, but we got to get them dollars in here before we implode. Obviously all that is terrible, but there are precedents to when you're at the cusp of a technological revolution and something is about to exponentially become more affordable, all of a sudden outrageous business plans become at least within the realm of possibility. One example is Microsoft continuously for decades was writing software that no computer could run because they knew that 18 months from now, okay, some will be able to, and another 18 months after that, all of them will be able to. And so likewise, if I'm being as charitable as possible, I could see Mars One believing that we're on the cusp of that type of thing. And then even the idea of, you called it a death cult. I don't think, and again, this is me putting on the most charitable interpretation, it was any more a death cult than the idea of a pioneer going to Oregon was, you're going to go to Oregon? When are you going to come back? You're like, no, I plan to die in Oregon. Die in Oregon? What is this death cult? And so the idea being that if they believed that they were on the cusp of all of a sudden it becoming more and more affordable to send more and more stuff, then it gets less and less crazy to imagine just moving to Mars and then just building out the cities. You become pioneers, and then that seems less crazy.
Like, they would be like pioneers. Say we're going to move to the middle of the Mojave Desert, and we think people will keep sending us food and water. And that was my approach. That's different for me because Oregon.
But
guess what? Native Americans were surviving there for years. This was the SpaceX proposal is the idea of let's lower the cost so we can continuously send rockets every 2 years, and let's build an infrastructure for doing that. And if we send people there, we're sure as hell going to have a plan to bring them back. That was my problem with this. It was this unintentionally suicidal.
All right, let me ask you guys this.
Okay.
Let me ask you this. So, same business plan, same reality television element, same membership thing. But it doesn't happen however many years ago. It happens today. And tag on, the CEO has up on his Instagram just a picture of him and Elon Musk at a party. Just kind of arm in arm. Therefore, just not even an official thing, not an official notice, not an official press release, but just some kind of indication that considering how much farther we are on the timeline now, how much more of a reality SpaceX is as a rocket company now than they were even 5 years ago, that now the idea of within 7 to 8 years, it's not quite as far-fetched. Does it change in any way, Andrew?
Wait, just saying the Mars One people?
Mars One, yeah.
I don't think they got one. When you had people who were finalists who are coming out saying that, calling it a scam, saying that they asked for money from our appearances and stuff like this, all of that they ignored the most optimistic advice from aerospace people. I'm not talking about the optimistic things. Why would I have confidence in them now? Why would I trust them?
No. I'm not. I'm saying the first one didn't happen. Like they are now. Mars One never announced 5 years ago. They're announcing today.
Well, it's you would ask the same questions you would ask. We ask. SpaceX talks about. Hey, we want to build colonies. You're like, okay, what are the technical details? How are you going to solve these problems? Why should we give our money to you as opposed to some other organization that maybe has scientists working on it and engineers?
So now it might even be more perilous because now there is real money in this, and you're like, well, wait, hold on. Like, if you want to be building colonies, like there are other people that are further along.
I think there are groups like the L5 Society and other ones which want to do people in space. I think are really cool, and they're maybe a little cultish, whatever, things like this. But they're braced in the science on this. If an organization started tomorrow that was like, hey, no, we got some scientists, engineers, we have a viable plan. I'll write a donation. I'm sure,
All right,
I
everybody.
got excited when I heard about Mars One initially. I'm like, oh, cool. And then I read there. I'm like, oh my God, this is horrible.
Brian, do you have any different feelings if they announce today?
Well, I mean, I am convinced that some version of essentially the same idea is gonna happen, and it's not even a question of if; it's just a question of when. So, to dance on the grave of Mars One is not to say, haha, I told you it was a bad idea. It's to say, too early, boys, too early, and you didn't get the right experts.
Well, I mean, I don't think colonizing Mars is a bad idea. My issue is the half-assery approach. Like I'd say, let's start our own right now. Let's start our own colonize our Mars exploration organization. I'm all for it. Let's do it.
All right. What are we calling it?
Mars 2.
Mars 2. The TOO. 2.
Look who's Marsing now.
But I'm serious. Like, I think I've said, hey, not here to bury Caesar to praise. Like, I'm a supporter of the Planetary Society. I like these things. I legit want us to have an organization that's excited about Mars and doing cool Mars things. I want that. Yeah, that was not what this.
Well, and I think that of all the arguments to be happy that Mars One is out of the picture, I think the strongest is because they were sucking the air out of the room for organizations and plans that had a much better chance of actually doing something. So it's like it's a bummer if a bunch of people have already looked at Mars One, came up with the idea like, oh yeah, going to Mars and staying there equals scam, and then that creates a problem when Elon Musk says, hey, I'm gonna go to Mars and stay there.
Yeah, I tend to think that part of it is just Mars One was a bit of an exploitation of excitement versus reality, and using that as a launching pad. And while I totally agree with you, Brian, that it's like, yeah, you want to know what? You might have been first in the door, and so you get shot first. There is, like, you look at them and it's like, well, I don't know. It's kind of seemed, like they just had a much more relevant coat of paint on magic beans than maybe somebody who was legitimately trying to do what they said they were trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with that.
Gentlemen, you want any picks?
Yeah, boy. I got a pick.
Yeah?
Hey, there's this service called Netflix. And,
tell me more.
I watched a thing on Netflix because I only watched the thing that people watched the week before on Netflix. I finished Sex Education. I thought it was charming and fun. And then I watched the first episode of Russian Doll, which I really liked. I have no idea. What is it? 8 episodes?
10?
Yeah.
10?
10?
8 or 10. I think. Yeah. So 8. It's 8.
I have no idea how it's going to stretch out to that many episodes based on the first episode. But I'm excited to see it because people seem to not hate it. So I am enchanted by the premise of it stretching out to 8 episodes.
Yeah. I don't think it's a spoiler to say, like, I too had that fear, and just as I was afraid that it was going to dip, and then I'm like, oh, wait, well, no, this is interesting now. And then they were able to keep me all the way to the end.
They do a thing in the middle of that series that makes you think, oh, this is they're going they do a thing in the middle of the series where you think, okay, so this is how they're going to do this show forever and ever and ever and ever, and it seems awful, but it's not. It's just enough to get you to the end, I think. Because I had a very similar thing of like, I don't know how much we have left in this tank, because this is.
But I think that this is what I love about that premise, about that Groundhog Day premise, is that you can go a lot of places with it, and you can either delve into the why, or you can make it about everything else and then make the why magical. There's a lot of things you can do, so it's just a matter of like it is just like a very audacious premise to start with, because you are basically daring the audience to say, watch how I fill in this blank page, which is interesting and cool.
You know, I think that I haven't seen it, but I'll tell you something that used that premise, and then you're 30 minutes into it and you're like, I get it, and then they change it up enough that you go, it was, and I can never remember the name, is Edge of Tomorrow.
Yes. I always call it The Day After Tomorrow, which is another movie entirely that's not good, but Edge of Tomorrow to me was one of those movies where I was like, this is awesome. And it gets into the why, and it does some other really cool stuff with that genre that I had not seen before, which was a super, super fun, but a big shout out to Edge of Tomorrow.
Yeah, agreed.
That was, just as a quick side, that was a movie that the marketing department, I think, really did damage, because they were worried about the name and they promoted it, but you saw on the put was like the day after today or whatever, that it to this day, like you see Edge of, you look like you see Live, Die, Repeat is big. They had other phrases that were big in the posters that like every time I go like, well, I know the original novel is called All You Need Is Kill, and I'm always going like, what was it called?
That's the thing, is that it swam through, because none of those names are good. Like
they gaslighted us.
Yeah, they've never, because like All You Need Is Kill, I have no idea what the hell's going on. Edge of Tomorrow, I have no idea what's going on.
Edge of Tomorrow, I'm actually going to defend that title because it preserves the surprise at the end of the first act. I think they desperately wanted, they're like, look, man, if we could just promote this as Tom Cruise sci-fi, maybe you're thinking, Minority Report kind of Tom Cruise stuff. And if you show up, like, it was so fun watching that movie with Josie, and she didn't know what the conceit was, and it was like at the end of the first act, her mind is already blown and she's all in. And Edge of Tomorrow is close enough to Live, Die, Repeat, where it's like you never quite get to tomorrow, you keep reliving the same day or whatever. That if it had landed, man, I think it would have been precious. But instead, it underperformed at launch, and so when they released the DVD, they pretty much changed the name to Live, Die, Repeat, which is, yeah, again, from an artistic perspective, the question is, how much do you give up? Do you protect the surprise the way Apple tries to?
I totally disagree, Brian, and I think that it should have gone with my suggestion, which is Groundhog Day or Starship Troopers. I don't know. How about both in the same movie starring Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt?
My problem is that I've been gaslighted into not knowing what the title of it is. Like, I literally don't know. Like, I cannot remember the name of this movie because they changed the titles, and there was in production. It's been like, fine, production doesn't count, but like twice. And I'm like, what is that movie? It's like some Jedi technique of like, remember this title? No, we're gonna give the Mandela effect to everybody. That's not what the movie was you saw.
Yeah. Go check it out, though. It's rad.
But I agree. I like Edge of Tomorrow's title. Either title's fine. I just want to know. I want certainty in my world.
Hey, did any of you guys see Swiss Army Man?
No.
Not sure how I felt about it. My pick is that you watch it and tell me what you think of it. And by you, I mean everybody. There are parts and ideas that I liked a lot. And then the ending, I was like, oh, all right.
Can you give us a little bit of conceit of it?
I mean, the stuff that they showed in the preview is a dude is stranded and alone, and a corpse washes up but the corpse is like amazingly useful in really base and weird ways. Like he farts so fast that he can ride him like a jet ski. He uses his teeth to bite and sever ropes, and he loads. He shoves I don't know, acorns in him, and then twists his arm, and he coughs and spits them out like bullets, and it's really absurdist, and I like the absurdist parts, and I like visually they create some really interesting set pieces. And of course, as you're watching all of this, you're like, well, is this guy going crazy? Is this really happening? It's so insane, over the top. Does he make it back home or whatever? Then the ending, if you ever get around to watching it, just tell me what you thought of the ending.
It was certainly a movie that was fun to hear about.
Yeah.
Because every time the absurdity kept getting, amped up more and more.
Yeah. And they do. And again, I mean, there's like 7 or 8, like, oh, that's yet another biological function that I guess could be weaponized or made into a useful thing. Yeah, I don't know. A cautious, reserved pick for Swiss Army Man. It was fun to play Hearthstone while watching.
I've got a pick. Over the past week, I have been in anticipation of season 3, catching up on season 2 of The Handmaid's Tale, and
oh man, a joyful rock and roll.
I will say. Season 2 is certainly less graphic than season 1. Not that it's not graphic, but it is certainly less. But I also think that it tries to... The end of season 1 has a very deliberate direction where you're like, okay, this is the start of a thing that is just a pretty well-known trope. And then season 2, the first few episodes of season 2, really changed it to be more of a character-driven thing, and so season 2 is a little different. But I have to say, overall, I'm enjoying it, and the drama and the tension are really solid. There's a really great episode in season 2. I want to say it's episode 10 or 11. Where I won't even talk about the details of it, but it is a very super tense, super suspenseful moment that feels totally earned. And
is it the one in the country home?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And all of, I guess that entire set piece, where it's all very well earned, and because it's a very quiet sort of, it's a very fits and spurts in terms of energy sort of show. When you have just that extended emotional and dramatic moment, I was definitely super tensing up along with the character. It's really solid. So I think if you liked season 1, really give season 2 a try. And it sounds like season 3 is on the way soon, but they didn't even have a date on the Super Bowl commercial. So.
They actually just had a date today. I saw. So if somebody can find that. I had mixed feelings about season 1. I very much enjoyed season 2's early commitment to its world building, because I think that is, to me, the most interesting part of that premise is what this nation is, what Gilead is, how Gilead became Gilead, and how Gilead functions,
and how it fits internationally. You see different bits that are...
And unfortunately, I kind of felt like it. I don't know if it's thought as much about Gilead as I want it to think about Gilead. And the one thing I can say about season 2 is, man, if you like creepy rituals, you are pretty much guaranteed one creepy ritual an episode, and that I'm all here for. Yeah. I love myself some creepy rituals from Gilead. But other than that, I was made furious by how they ended the second season, to the point where I don't really want to watch the third.
Oh, okay. So I haven't watched the last episode yet. So I guess I'll text you when I finish.
I think when the show gets beyond its self, well, I don't know. There's some kind of societal elements. Obviously, it does not shy away from being a commentary on culture and politics, right? And I think that when it gets, I don't find that the most interesting part of it.
Yeah.
And I think that it is there as a performative element at times that subtracts from the fact that at its core, it could be a really rad, like, post-apocalyptic sort of like science fiction thing, but you have to tell us the story of why it's there. That's what's fascinating about it. Here's what I'll say. There is a point toward the end of the season when I heard more people talk about a briefly shown map of Gilead than where any of the characters ended up by the end of the end of the season. And that, I feel, is indicative of the fact that we got a brief second and everybody wanted to talk about where things are on the map and no conversation about where these characters ended up. And that frustrated me a lot.
Lost statue, four-toed statue.
Yeah. And it's like, look, yeah, when you see the four-toed statue, you're like, man, I'm pumped to see how we can weave all this in. They're throwing a lot of balls in the air, and yet it's more about how Sawyer's a really lonely guy, and one day he'll find love.
Yeah.
June 5th. Just found out. June 5th, season 3. So.
Or is it Offred 5th?
Oh, do you think that's intentional? Do you think that they're going to do that in the marketing? Make a trailer that says Offred 5th?
I don't know.
They have to, right?
I don't think subtlety is a real strength of that show or the marketing behind it. So probably.
Yeah.
My pick is let's watch this again. Galaxy Quest.
Oh man, so good, so good.
Mike Grabthar's hammer.
Wasn't there? I thought we had talked about a TV series in the works. I don't know if it was a Netflix thing or what, but man, it's great.
There'd been talk. Periodically there'd been talk about doing it, and then when Alan Rickman died, a lot of the enthusiasm for that went away. Then there was talk again, and gosh, I forget a comedian writer. Like Paul Scheer, I think it was like attached to like bring it back, and then it sort of didn't happen. And then there was talk about doing it kind of like the new generation of cast or whatever. So it's one of these things that it would be delightful, but with the loss of Alan Rickman, it's kind of like I'm often like, hey, bring everything back that we want it back or whatever. But so much of that, just the dynamic, with him, it's just,
oh God, it's just so good and so perfect. And that cast, a cast at just the right time for everybody. Oh God,
I wonder what the original R-rated version would have looked like, because there are some moments like they developed it to be an R-rated thing, and there's a couple of moments that really stand out where she needs to jump through some gnashing gate or whatever and says screw that, and her lips are not saying screw that. Yeah, and then and likewise they really only imply that the transporter guy Monk is high all the time. Like in fact, it the first time I saw it, I was like, he's acting weird like a villain or whatever, and I didn't get it. And then only after I found out, like, oh, this is originally going to be rated R, I bet they explicitly made it clear he was just baked all the time. But now it's like instead he just kind of acts weird.
Oral history. Bring me an oral history of Galaxy Quest. How has this not happened? I'm challenging theringer.com. Get me the oral history of Galaxy Quest. Post haste.
Yeah. So, there's one line in there where Sam Rockwell's character said, like, are you high or whatever? And that's, I think the extent of our, the reference. But then you look at like, oh yeah, he's like a stoner.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why he's fallen in love with this television show, because he gets high and watches Galaxy Quest.
Wait, no, he was on.
No, he was on it. He was.
Sorry. I thought it meant okay. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. So yeah, there's been not a lot of. I don't think there's been any talk in like a year or so over a revival of it. So
yeah.
You know what's wild is I don't know that my kids would get anything about it. And maybe they're familiar with the tropes just by osmosis from culture, but they never watched much Star Trek.
I think the idea of the people that did the thing being recognized by aliens. I mean, like it's not like science fiction and space adventure has gone away. If anything, there are more people that are past their prime and have a tortured relationship with their early career that, would be pulled out of it. Like, I think that idea, I mean, geez, think of it like that. Think of where fan conventions were at the point that Galaxy Quest comes out compared to where fan conventions are now.
Oh, yeah.
Like that whole idea, like imagine any con anywhere in America. Now that cast is transported to the world that they were operated in fantasy.
And I wonder how much of the joke at the time was perceived as, making fun of those conventions before those conventions became, the new norm.
Well, the SNL skit that probably inspired it.
Yeah, the one where the dude is wearing a shirt that says "I grok Spock" and William Shatner just tears off into them.
Move out of your parents' basement.
Yeah.
Those of you who haven't done it, go look up William Shatner SNL, and that was a great. It's the classic, skit. Which, anyhow, listen, everybody. It's been weird.
Thank you, boys. I will talk to you guys later.
All right.
Thanks for coming, Justin. All right. He's gone.
Oh, I thought Justin was just locked in a pensive look.
Oh, no.
The video froze.
No, it holds on the last frame.
That's funny.
Alrighty. You guys need a break?
Yeah. Let me just grab a soda, and I'll BRB.
Alrighty, we'll start after.
I'll go break too for a second.
Oh, okay. Hey, everybody. Starting after things in just a minute. After. How's your weekend, everybody? How was your weekend? I'm okay. Mine was okay. I had a really long shoot yesterday. It was like 6.5 hours, and it was mostly outside. So it was like 35-40 degrees yesterday, and now it's like 60. It's like 60 degrees this week. So this is fucking weather, man. But yeah, I got me tired. And then Handmaid's Tale is good, but it's heavy. It's heavy and draining. I'll talk about it a little bit on Cord Killers. But I had to find something to break up the Handmaid's Tale with, and I just so happened to see on Twitter about all the AAF stuff. That's not a good. I don't think the abbreviation is good. AAF. It's hard to say, but they're doing a new farm league for football, and so I clicked over to the PlayStation and watched some of those games. But it's an interesting thing. Well, I'll talk about it more on Cord Killers in a couple hours here. Yeah, that was kind of the weekend, and then I made pulled pork. I made some really awesome pulled pork last week, and so I'm making my way through that. But it's I think it's made my apartment smell. So we'll see. Hey,
This is what?
Pulled pork.
Oh, you still working your way through it?
Yeah, I have a good bit of leftovers. That's good. It heats up good. I mixing it with some cheesy penne, some broccoli.
Nice.
Yeah. Someone there's a Discord server, and I had they have a channel for like, hey, if you buy something, post a photo of it, and just like for discussion stuff. And I posted a picture of my grocery cart like a week or two ago. Like, oh, no vegetables, huh? So it made me self. So I ended up getting some broccoli. So
Man, I'm starting to get. I think we finally have HEB delivery available here, which we didn't have for the longest time.
Oh, nice.
Which is like. Do
you have curbside?
Life changer. Curbside is where you pick it up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do have that at the closest HEB.
Yeah. Yeah, we just got curbside because we had delivery for a while, and then they just built out the curbside stuff at mine.
Ah, okay.
But it's always, I know for the delivery you have to do it the day before. You have to set up your cart and buy it the day before. And I always just like go on a whim. But I like going grocery shopping because I can go in the middle of the day. It's not crazy. Kelly138, no, I only watched a few episodes of F is for Family. I hear the people who like it really like it. I don't know that
I like the first season a lot.
Yeah, apparently season 3's out.
Yeah, I think I started the second season, but didn't follow up on it.
Yeah. Anything you guys want to talk about for after things?
Do we have?
I don't think we have an email.
Did we have an email?
I don't think we have an email.
Okay. I had a thing. Oh yeah, I got a thing. There's an article in Medium by a guy that talks about on his failure to build $1 billion company, and it's the guy who created Gumroad.
What is it?
The guy who created Gumroad.
I don't know. I'm not familiar with Gumroad.
There's part of the problem.
Okay.
We'll talk about that. We'll get it. It's about and it basically ended up creating, a lifestyle company, meaning it supports him, but it's not a thing that's going to have huge growth. We talk about, I guess, kind of the idea of what the scale of your ambition to that effect. Have you seen the pizza locker at Little Caesars, by the way?
No, is that like you?
Oh, that's like the hot and ready stuff, right? You go in and they just pull out a pepperoni for you.
Oh, they don't.
It's like an Amazon locker. You walk up and you're like, beep, bop, boop, I'll take my pizza.
That's
Scan
clever.
your QR code. It goes, psh, door opens up. There's your pizza. Door opens up for your other 2 pizzas. If you order 3 pizzas, like somebody I know, pull them out and you're done. You don't have to talk to a human at all.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I guess it makes sense for a pizza place where you can pre-make that stuff and just keep it heated.
Well, I mean, they will, like, you order it in advance, and then you show up. So, like, I ordered from the time I click order, and it said, your pizza is going to be ready in 16 minutes. I'm like, I can't even cook a pizza in the oven, from, like, a frozen pizza that fast.
Mm-hmm.
Then some of those have to be those hot and readies then, right?
I had a custom, but they also had hot and ready. But, I mean, they have the conveyor belt their pizza ovens pretty fast. And so, anyhow, I was amazed by this, and I thought about this, like, I think I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to invest in automation robotics. I'm going to push really, really hard for raising minimum wage to like $30, $50 an hour.
Is that that's a dig on Amazon or Jeff Bezos or?
Well, no, I'm just saying that like
because that's literally what he's doing.
And I'm like, oh, there are less people working in this pizza place now because now it's just the machine that can do this.
Well, and that's literally what Jeff Bezos did. John Stossel just did a whole thing kind of crapping on him for it. It's just like, man, I was applauding for you. But then you are using your dominant position to squeeze out any competition by which is the thing you could do. Once you have all the robots running your Amazon empire, then it makes a lot of sense to have a strategy where you make the minimum wage enough that nobody can compete and afford to go up against you.
Yeah. Business. Politics.
Business. All right, cool.
Alrighty.
Ready?
Because, I'm good to go. If you're good to go,
Yeah.
take it away, Andrew.
Hello and welcome to the After Things podcast. I'm Andrew Main, joined by Brian Brushwood
Hello.
and Mr. Bryce Castillo.
That's me, number 3.
As it has always been.
I found an interesting article was on Medium. And of course, there was a much more attention-grabbing article on Medium last week from Jeff Bezos, but I don't need to get into that. The headline for this was, and this was actually came from Hacker News, which is just a great source for stuff, reflecting on my failure to build a $1 billion company. And I apologize to the author, Sahil Lavinia, for mispronouncing your name. I'm an idiot. I don't know how to say things. So I read this, saw this. Okay, well, I guess we've almost all of us have failed to build $1 billion companies, right? I mean, it's kind of,
Sure.
sort of extent. I'm like, well, who is this person? What have they done? And then you start off with the first line. In 2011, I left my job as a second employee at Pinterest. before I vested any of my stock to work on what I thought would be his life's work.
Oh boy.
Wow.
Well, the company he went on to create is well known in some circles, but it's one of these things that we can get into why it didn't build or couldn't go beyond, but it is a real company that does helpful things, which is Gumroad, which was back then was an early attempt at like helping artists sell things, t-shirts, things like that, with the idea that you don't have to create your own e-commerce site, whatever. We'll give you a link. We make it easy for you to sell things.
Yeah, they'll make
And
you a
that's what Gumroad
website
does.
and e-commerce stuff. I've heard I feel like I've seen people sell stuff on Gumroad. I don't know if I've purchased anything, but then that becomes a creator issue and not quite a platform issue. But I've at least heard the name Gumroad. Maybe there's a chance I've bought something.
Yeah, so it's, and I would say that might be part of why their growth maybe was never as much as it could have been. Like they were kind of like an early version of, and maybe I don't know when Shopify actually started, but like around Shopify, but like for online creators, people like this who are selling digital stuff, but you could do physical. And it was just an easier approach towards doing this. And the goal was for the company to grow considerably, like any company. And he actually he announced it on like Hacker News, had 50,000 people in one day go check it out. And they started to have people go on board. And it started to grow, and they actually got venture capital. They got like got $1 million investment in that. And I think they got another $1 million investment in it. But there's a very interesting thing. When you get venture capital, you hear like, somebody wants to give me $1 million for my company, and it's like, okay. Here's the thing. If they invest $1 million in your company and they get buy 10% of your company, you got to prove that you are now going to become a $10 million company, meaning whatever you're making now, it's not why they bought it. They invested in you because they want growth. That means that $1 million, doesn't go into your bank and you're like, hey, I sold somebody part of my company. That money goes into hiring employees and trying to expand. And so Gumroad expanded. They expanded their office spaces. They hired, a bunch more employees. And they had growth, and if you look at the chart that shows the how the steady rate, you see what looks like nice, steady, upwardly moving growth, but it's not enough. It's not enough growth to justify venture capital funding. If you can, let me see if I can scroll down so I can see the timeline there. And that was one of the things he talked about was they had over a 3-year period, you saw steady growth, but then they had, when they're running out of the money from the venture capital, the money they had in the bank, because they weren't profitable, and you had this many employees, then you ran into a point where you're looking at, oh man, in 3 months' time, we're not going to be able to make our rent or pay employee salaries. So what do? You let go of 75% of the staff and figured out how to keep things going and kept it going. Today, the company's real. It's still functioning, but it's not a high growth rate company. He was one of the venture capitalists that sold them back their percentage of the company for like $1. And now he runs it, as he describes, it's like a lifestyle. They call it a lifestyle company, these things, where it's basically, it makes you money. It supports some other people to be that, but it's not a thing that's a high growth company, not a thing that's going to be, become a target of venture capital. So.
Wow.
So, so where are we at now? Like, is it just running flatlined or folded or?
No, it runs. It's still there. It's the idea that he said, okay, I'm not going to, his goal was he wanted to build $1 billion company, like a big $1 billion company. Now he realizes this company's never going to grow at a rate will justify it to be $1 billion company. It's going to make X amount a year, maybe a slight improvement, but it's not going to go beyond, that. It's never going to make enough money to justify being $1 billion company. But then he realizes, hey, I provide a service for creators, for people who need to sell stuff. I'm doing a really useful thing. I'm paying my bills. My employees are paid. We have a cool thing here. It's not going to be the next Google or PayPal or something like that, but it's not bad to not be that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think there is that, and maybe it's a Silicon Valley echo chamber thing where it's just like, all your friends are doing the $1 billion companies. That must be why you're in business, is to have it be $1 billion. Meanwhile, a multi-million-dollar company that is an engine that runs on its own, that you don't have to deal with. It's like not all annuities have to. I mean, it could be just an annuity. It can make you a steady cash flow of $500,000 of profit a year, and you get to own the whole thing, and good for you.
Yep.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
Well,
That's a fight. Then now you can go off and build whatever other thing.
This also built off of the CNBC article from a couple weeks back about Patreon. The Jack Conte from Patreon said, hey, we make a profit and we make a lot of money, but not enough for investors. And so we're going to be rolling out more features to try to pull more money out of people, which is unfortunate because Patreon is otherwise a very successful, profitable company. But if you're an investor and Patreon is not growing in the way that you want, then that puts the business at jeopardy.
Yeah, and it really is putting it in jeopardy because I know exactly nobody who's really excited about Patreon.
New Patreon features.
Yeah. Although Justin had a point. He said there's tons of features that he would like to see. He wants a button that says handle my taxes. Like just literally press this button and they will withhold a certain amount of the money. They have their own CPAs. They'll do the heavy lifting. So later on you just press other buttons. Sure. It's like take another 5% for that. Great.
Yeah.
And then
there are enough big campaigns on Patreon that would be a worthy reason for Patreon to take a percentage cut.
Yeah,
more than like trying to get into the saturated merchandise game, which we've seen them make acquisitions for last year.
And you could even one thing that's universal about creatives is that they don't tend to love the nuts and bolts of tax stuff. Sure. And so my guess is you could have that be a fairly high margin add-on that people would be like, I like the peace of mind. I like knowing that the tax thing is handled.
Yeah.
And
especially if you're doing quarterly taxes, which, if you're a new creative getting into a system like Patreon, you would be unfamiliar with or just unaccustomed to. If you had a system that helped you out with that, then yeah, I think that would be a big value add. And continue, Justin was talking about, well, Patreon should be a bank, and that would be a very bank-like thing to do. Financial services.
Yeah, that's and I was totally unaware that this other article that was what this influenced this, and it's skimming through there, like I would listen, we love Patreon, we love what they do, but when they talk about if they want to be able to make more out of the reduce Patreon's generous 90% payout model, and it's like
that's what makes Patreon great.
They don't host. They don't have to provide, bandwidth. They don't have to really do a lot of these things. And so I come from the point of view, like, what are you doing to justify more? And again, they want to provide more services, but it's like, getting 10% of every podcaster income revenue stream coming in there that you can make it in there, like, sounds to me like a wonderful business model. That sounds like a great business model. And I think if the tools were better and the experiments was better, that they would probably have much more growth, but.
I mean, nutty idea. They don't need to. They don't need growth. Expand
Well, but then you get into venture capital.
They're running out. They can't. They're saying that it won't be sustainable.
Well, specifically, they said that they can't grow to please their investors. That's the whole thing. Is like apparently between the lines, what they're saying is if we just reduced our staff and just did our quiet little bank thing and just were the way everybody got paid, then they would be fine. But we have investors who want growth, and the only way for us to grow is to start tacking on a lot of crap that it sounds like people at first blush don't want. And so, I don't know. It seems like more rocky times are ahead for Patreon.
Well,
of their own devising.
When you take on investors, you have other people who are investors, another word for a co-owner. So
yep.
I
mean, they get to say they're like, no, I gave you money because you have to grow it into a lot more money. I didn't get it so I could see a measly few percentage return on my investments.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's a version of it where they figure out how to be sustainable and keep doing what they're doing. I look at it and I'm like, Patreon is. It's an amazing nexus of where it can be and what it could be. But, are we looking at the company that came, are we looking at Friendster and waiting for the better model to come along?
Well, and it's, like you mentioned earlier, like Patreon is, at least the way it is now, is a very scalable business just technically, right? Like the heaviest hosting that they deal with is audio for for the podcasts and stuff. And hosting and bandwidth are only going to get cheaper. That is a service that scales very, very well compared to something like YouTube, which is like constantly hosting free videos that are expensive and require a lot of maintaining between apps and content, and it's unfortunate when a simple business plan like this has to when that's not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, you don't know. Nobody knows what the future's going to be, and you can have what sounds like a great business plan initially, and then, there's what you set out to do, there's what you have to do to get by, then there's what people want you to do, and what your investors want, what your creators want. So, I'm glad that it exists. I hope they figure things out, but. It is, both of these are sort of, things to think about when you're planning your ambitions and small scale businesses. When I started writing magic books, I had to say, like, what's my goal? Where is this going to go for me? And I knew, like, I would write them because I liked writing them, but it wasn't something that I wanted to have be my full-time job. I didn't want to become a full-time magic publisher. I didn't want to spend my time doing that. As a novelist now, I like to write books. I like to write these. What's my goal? I'm like, I want to put out 2 or 3 books a year, promote them, and then do other stuff. And, that's fine. I'm not at publishing conventions. I'm not pushing it. I push my books, but other than that, I'm not pushing my career. I'm not, telling my agent to get me meetings to go pitch screenplays and stuff.
Well, and the other thing too is that, when you're an independent creator, you often have multiple different projects, and each one is like starting a little miniature business. And what you want to do, you don't want to have one fire hose of money, because when that one engine breaks, you have no money. What you want are dozens of trickles of the ability that any one of them can go sideways, and it doesn't affect the others. And I would imagine at the larger scale, I'd rather have 12 businesses that make $2 million a year than one business that makes 50.
Yeah, I mean, we should all be lucky enough to have that choice. But the thing I think about is, I do think, like, what if I put 100% of my effort into this? Like, if I put 100% of my effort into writing, like, what would I do? Like, okay, I can only sell so many books under Andrew Mayne. I'd probably come up with another name to go write under and do that and try to replicate some of my success there, and do what people like Michael Crichton and Stephen King had done, which was, if you're a high output writer, was just do that. That would be the thing I would do, because I've had a pretty good every other 1 out of 3 books goes crazy. New titles I launch goes like ballistic as far as popularity. So it's like, man, like, maybe I could do that with a different name or whatever. And that would be the thing I think about, is like, I'm giving up to pursue these other things. Like, maybe I'm giving up more success.
Right. Well, and certainly leaning into whatever is proving the most successful at any given time, makes sense, and figuring out ways to up that bandwidth, I think, works.
Yeah, that's tough, because there are some there are some types of creative endeavors that you need a certain amount of your dedication of time to really start to get the wheel rolling.
Yeah, I mean, I and it's funny because I say this because, like, I mean, I've been very lucky in publishing. Very, very, like, right now, Naturalist is the #1 thriller on Amazon, right? And Murder Theory has been doing incredible, right? And I'm very, very lucky for that. But but I'm with people. I go like, all right, I did this part time. What if I did full time? What if I did that? Because, like, this is great, but should I be pushing hardcovers? Should I be in all the airports or whatever? That's the thing you think about, is like, okay, now that I know I can do this.
Is that are you not doing hardcovers, or I thought you were?
Paperbacks.
Oh, got it. Man, for some reason,
yeah, I have like 4 in hardcovers, but I don't have, like, here. Like, I'm not, most of my, I think primarily most of my sales is ebooks, which I'm thrilled with. Like, I don't, but you sit there and you go like, oh well, what if.
Yeah, sure.
Well, in some of those bigger plays, I don't know how this specifically interacts with your path, Andrew, but some of that stuff, if you're an author, you would want you might need to lean on a publisher to handle doing, manufacturing and putting books in stores.
Oh yeah, there's like, if I'm saying, like, for me, higher growth would be like I have a great relationship with my publisher here, and I have a great relationship with a couple other publishers internationally. And I'm saying that like I think about like, oh well, what should I be doing? So you just sort of sit there and go like, what is that?
Yeah.
Anyhow, I digress.
Yeah. So aim medium. That's our suggestion.
Sponsored by Medium.com.
Yeah. Yeah. Ain't
But
nothing wrong with organically figuring out, how big something wants to be.
And we've talked before on this show, I'm sure, of how digital technologies have made it easier to get into creative fields without needing, immediate buy-in from a publisher, from a record label, from, a TV studio, right? Like the ability to go out and make music and films and go write and publish things on your own has made it easier. Like I'm glad to hear that Gumroad is still going to be around, because it sounds like, it is another option in terms of like the digital marketplace of content.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. If you have an idea, try it. Nobody knows the shape or what the scale of these things would be. Gumroad was a company that people thought, hey, this could be huge, and it ended up being a viable company that's not a high growth rate company. Then you had companies like Airbnb, which many people are like, no, this is ridiculous. Nobody's going to do this. And now Airbnb is worth valued at $30 billion or something.
So amazing.
Gosh.
Nobody knows anything. Nobody knows anything. And it really is, some ideas might be really inherently stupid, but maybe not. But ultimately, your passion's got to be the thing that drives it. I had a friend that, made out pretty well with an internet startup that did reviews and stuff. And I'm like, what happened? He's like, well, he said, I started it years ago with 3 friends. And then we went off and did our own thing. But one guy kept it going. One guy kept working on it, kept going, and grew and grew and grew. Then Amazon or somebody came along and bought it. And then, he got a good payout, but it was because one guy had the passion to keep at it. So,
yeah.
Any picks?
Did I already talk last week that I was reading Start With Why?
No.
So this is I've made a habit that I think is a good habit in general. Although it would be problematic for our show and all the picks that we give. But when I listen to a podcast and I trust the person on the podcast, and whenever they mention a book that they think I should read, I try to just immediately press pause on that podcast and go read the book. And in this case, I was listening to Under the Influence, the CBC show about marketing and advertising, and he did an episode on his book picks, and this is from about 10 years ago, but it's called Start With Why. And if you picture a 3-circle bullseye, the outermost ring is what you do, the middle ring is how you do it, and then the center is why you do it. And most businesses focus on the outer ring first, and then sort of just wing it when you get to the center. For example, what do you do? We make computers. How do you do it? We ship directly to customers, so we save you money. Why do you do it? I don't know, because you probably need computers. We're Dell. Whereas Apple completely flips that on its head. They start with why. They're like, we're out to change the world. We're out to empower those who want to shake up the status quo. Sure. How do we do it? By giving you the tools to change the planet. Why and what do we do? Yeah. Oh, I guess I don't know. I guess we sell computers until it no longer is computers. Then it becomes MP3 players. Then it becomes phones. So you notice the what they do is all over the map, and it doesn't matter because their why has always remained exactly the same.
Oh, that was in wasn't that in Made to Stick? Also working from your principal message and expanding out, because I remember the anecdote about Southwest. I remember, or maybe it's not from Made to Stick, but it's an anecdote about Southwest, and they want to be a cheap. The cheapest.
Well, and their why was we want to empower the little guy to be able to get around, and the how we do it is by offering low fares. The what we do is offer something better than your car or a bus.
Sure. Well, this specific anecdote was like, hey, we have these low fares. It would only cost us X amount to add meals for long flights, and because they want to be a low cost ticket, they said, no, we're not going to do meals because that's just going to raise the price of the ticket. And what
Right.
we're trying to do is have low ticket prices. So, starting with a concept and a principle is I mean, that's perfect advice, for anyone starting anything, even outside of just business models. If you're working on anything, when you have the message in mind, then you know where to go from there, from what you're trying to convey, rather than trying to work just from a strictly financial element.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's solid.
This is near and dear to my heart. I'm a big fan of that with anything. When I sit down to write a book, I go, why? Why is this book? Why am I writing this book? What's the character supposed to do? What's the goal here? What's this? So when I'm halfway into it, I know, I'm not going to go down this alley because that's not what this is about. Businesses, everything. I think it applies to so many things that I love the idea of the why. I get that, like, when I'm, writing, in the middle of writing, I'll be like, what? My version of that, like, what's next? Because what's true to what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
So.
Do I have a pick? I have a little pick. This is not a business pick, but this is a game that I started playing recently. There is a new tactical game out on it's on the Switch and on consoles and PC and stuff, called Wargroove. If you were into games like Advance Wars, which are these tactics-based battlefield games, this looks a lot like that, except instead of being like tanks and futuristic stuff, it's fantasy themed. But it looks really cool, and it plays nice on the Switch. So that's my pick, Wargroove.
Cool.
My pick, and I mentioned this earlier in Weird Things, is, hey, if you're ever looking for kind of a cool stream of stories, go to news.ycombinator.com. Hacker News. Hacker News has been, just a great little stream of, cool items.
Oh yeah. So. Was there anything you've seen on there recently, or is this all tech stuff?
It generally leans to be tech, tech related, tech, science, things like this. It could be tech, science, business. So this is by Y Combinator, which is, one of the biggest startup accelerators, one of the first ones, and, was their own sort of site. So you get a lot of people who are interested in tech and other related things who come in there and, post articles and stuff on there. So I participate here in a little bit on one of the Reddit forums, which you can probably guess which one. It's pretty kind of a neat source of stuff.
That's cool. I always feel like I see Y Combinator threads pop up every once in a while, and that Medium about Gumroad started with a Y Combinator thread in 2011. Look at that.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. Groovy.
Solid.
It's been after.
Huzzah.
Awesome.
Huzzah.
Hey, good show,
All
everybody.
right, gentlemen.
Good deal.
We're gonna head out.
Yeah, I got works to do.
Gotta get ready for Cord Killers. You doing any more streams? I saw you were streaming over the weekend, Andrew, on Twitter.
Yeah, I might do a few more. Actually, I think I'm the Cord Killers guest today, right?
Oh, that's right. You're on Cord Killers today.
Oh, fantastic. Cool.
We'll talk
That's
to you
at
in a couple
4, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, cool.
4 Pacific.
All right, I'll see you soon.
Yeah, we'll talk.
See y'all there.
We'll talk to you later then, Andrew. And everybody will see you later. Bye, guys.